Okay, sadly, Max isn't able to be with us. I was looking forward to see him speak because he's a fellow master's student. And if nothing else, I thought it might help and encourage and inspire one of us to stand up here next year for the 6th PFAL conference. But we've changed the programme. If we do need another break, I'll take a show of hands later. But our next speaker is Fiona Long. She works at the Metropolitan University of Manchester. She currently teaches English to various cohorts of undergraduate university students. Fiona has a particular interest in the effectiveness of pre-sessional English courses, but particularly looking at from the point of view of the students. So Fiona, it's a privilege to welcome you here.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for inviting me today. So, yeah, as we said in the introduction, this is what I've been researching for the last couple of years on and off. So I work at Manchester Metropolitan, and I coordinate the pre-sessional English courses. And I don't know if anybody hasn't heard of a pre-sessional course. Essentially, it's like a pre-masters course for students, but focusing mostly on English language and academic skills. So the gap for the students is a language gap rather than a specific subject knowledge gap. And the courses that I run take place over the summer, various lengths of courses, and students with various levels of language. So what we're interested in is this idea of usefulness of background. Manchester Met is a large university. We have about 38,000 students, but we have a really small international student body of about 3,000 international students. And from them we have what is, for in comparison, a tiny pre-sessional. We have about 120 students on our pre-sessional course, which is very small compared to most other universities. So the university has recently launched an internationalisation agenda, like a lot of other institutions, trying to increase international student numbers, trying to increase links with partners in other countries. And so obviously we play a role in that, as we are preparing international students for their academic study, mostly master's study. At the same time, the university has got this programme of changing assessment, so moving away from exams, moving towards more assessment for learning. So continuous assessments, ongoing through courses, and getting rid of, in many cases, final exams, final SAT papers. And so as part of the pre-sessional course, we've also done that with some elements of our course. We haven't previously done any institutional research into our pre-sessional courses. At the end of pre-sessional, and I guess with many courses, the course finishes and you hand out a questionnaire at the end, and the students tick yes, 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 hopefully. And then they all go because they're desperate to leave and to get on with the next thing in their life, which in our case is, as I say, normally a master's course, and they just want to move on. The other thing with research or information gathered directly after the course is that it doesn't really tell us what the students are able to do, because they haven't had any practice in real life. So we've prepared them, but at that point we don't know if they are going to be able to use the knowledge that we've given them. Previous studies into pre-sessional programs tends to focus on particular things, so assessment validity, scores, how students have fared in exams, and also language elements, so academic writing, pronunciation, this kind of thing. And I don't know if anybody's aware of this study with Thorpe and a group of colleagues in 2017, where they produced quite a large study questioning pre-sessional use, if you like. They said that pre-sessional programs didn't serve students as well as, for example, having an IELTS score or having some other kind of provision before they came into a university. And we were quite surprised by this, because we thought, well, our students say the course is good, if you like. They seem to like it, and everyone does pre-sessional courses. So we thought, well, that's a bit worrying if these people are saying that it's not very useful. Perhaps I'll be out of a job very soon. So there was that for us to bear in mind. There was also some redevelopment we'd done of some of our assessments. So, as I said, there's this move towards assessment for learning. So we had removed reading and listening exams and replaced them with continuous assessment. There's various research about this which suggests that exams, particularly in these two skills, aren't really very useful. Exams are hard to write, it takes a lot of time to write exams, you need to practice, you need to test them on people, and we find that students obsess. If you say there's going to be an exam, all they want to do is practice for the exam. And they want past papers, and they just want to keep doing papers. And that doesn't help them in any way to practice their skills. It just tests what they know on the day. And so we decided to move towards continuous assessment. And so what we do in the summer is every week we give all the students a reading text and a piece of listening, give them 1 week, and we ask them then to write a summary of what they've read or what they've heard and a critical response to the piece. They submit it, we mark, we have tutorials where we give feedback, we give them another piece, and on it goes. So we can see development in reading and listening assessments, reading and listening skills, as they go through the summer, and we can pick up people who aren't doing very well and try to tutor them a bit more, rather than leaving it until the end of the course and then saying, oh, you're not very good at speaking, oh, sorry, you're not very good at reading, are you? Not sure if you can do a master's. And so we've had a little bit of feedback on this. So one of my colleagues did his master's dissertation, particularly looking at the reading results, and we've noticed that probably you can see where we changed from exam to continuous assessment, that the scores went up, the average scores went up, and I guess more importantly for the students, the amount of resubmissions went down dramatically. So we can see that from our point of view, assessment for learning gives better results, but again, in terms of longer term benefit for the students, that's another thing that we didn't know. So a colleague and I managed to get a Scholarship of Teaching and Learning grant from the university as part of this internationalisation strategy, and we decided that our main question really was this wondering to what extent the pre-sessional programme prepares students for their master's study. And so we had a whole range of sub-aims. So we were interested in their language, their vocabulary. We were interested in whether the assessment we do maps onto the assessment on the main course. We were interested in their confidence, and whether, as well, I suppose as side questions, whether faculties could actually benefit or understand what we were doing, and whether we could work with faculties in this kind of teaching of skills. This is what Trowler calls insider research, so research in your own institution, and that is good in some ways. It means that you've got bodies available to ask the questions. It doesn't mean they all volunteer, but you've got the people right in front of you. It also means that you really, in some cases, can affect change quite easily. So it's our course, and if the students say stuff, I can develop the course, adjust the course to make a difference immediately. At the same time, obviously, there are disadvantages to this, one being that some things become normalised. So if students start saying things, we think, well, that's perfectly normal, that's what happens on this course, whereas if an outsider came in, perhaps they'd be thinking, no, that's not right, or that's a bit strange to do it like that, and we don't have the benefit of distance from ourselves. The other thing that is a risk here, particularly as we are speaking to our own students, or our former students, is the risk of interview bias, that students might respond how they think that we want them to respond. It was a small scale study. We've managed to get in touch with and get agreement from about 6% of our students, so it's been really small. We emailed them all and said, would anybody like to help us, and that's what we got. And we went for qualitative research really because we felt that large scale research gives you, like I say, tick boxes, yes and no, but you don't really get in-depth feedback. You don't really get the details and maybe a picture of what's happening in these students' academic lives after the pre-sessional course. So we started with semi-structured interviews, and we invited each student in and we asked them a series of questions. Obviously, same questions for each person, but with the possibility of them going off topic or expanding a little bit if they wanted to. So giving them some freedom within the interview. We didn't ask them what they understood by effectiveness. We didn't tell them what we thought effectiveness was. What we were hoping was that as they talked, themes would come out and that we would be able to build a picture of what was working for those students from pre-sessional course during their master's course. So we were hoping that they would reflect on what had happened on our course and what they were using, what was working for them subsequently. So in this first phase, we didn't know at this time there were going to be 2 phases, so we thought this was it. So we got response from 5 students, 5 different nationalities, and from 5 different master's programs. And we invited them in December, January, so this is 2018, and 2018-19, so 4 or 5 months after they finished the pre-sessional course. And we asked them some questions, and these are the same kind of themes as our research aims. And so, having gone through these questions, we found that we had 4 main themes. So from what they said, 4 real main areas emerged. So the first thing that people talked about was the type of assessment that they were doing on their master's course. And we found that they said generally they were familiar with academic writing conventions, so referencing, they knew about plagiarism, because we've told them many times. They felt that the skills they needed had been covered on the pre-sessional course, so that was good. What they also mentioned, though, sometimes was that there were some assessment types which were difficult for them. So we didn't cover reflective writing, we didn't cover writing reports, and so when these came up on the master's course, they didn't know how to do them. And so usually they resorted to the internet to find out. So that was something that we thought it's kind of we've been partially effective here. The second theme was really trying to understand whether they thought that the pre-sessional course had been useful looking back. And people generally said, yes, from the learning outcomes, what you said we would learn, we have learnt. So we've got these academic writing skills, we know about critical thinking, we know about research skills, so these are the things we thought we would learn, and we learned them, so that was useful. Nobody really mentioned their grades. Nobody really said, and I got this score, or I noticed that my score went from this to this. They were talking much more generally about the skills they'd got rather than their particular grades or their particular level of English at this point. One of the big things we were interested in was confidence, so student confidence, and this was quite mixed. We had contradictions here, so somebody saying I'm not confident at all, somebody else saying, well, my confidence is growing over time. And I think that partly this is to do with the academic skills. So this student saying that he was kind of ahead of students, other international students who hadn't had the pre-sessional. He knew things they didn't, and that had helped his confidence to increase. He felt that he was a little bit more knowledgeable or able to handle his course a bit better. But what we really found out here was that there was a lack of confidence depending on the other students' nationalities. So a common response was, most of my classmates are native speakers, and in the same conversation, I really lack confidence. Like, oh, there's a link here. The other thing which made people lose confidence was lack of vocabulary, lack of subject-specific vocabulary, which isn't something that we cover on our masters, on our pre-sessional, sorry. And so these seem quite logical. If you don't have the vocabulary you need, your confidence might reduce. The last one which came up, and it's kind of linked to the confidence, was speaking. And it's quite interesting what we were doing this morning with this idea of trying to get people to speak more, that these students really acknowledged that speaking was probably the most important skill that they needed on their postgraduate course. So although we go on and on about reading and writing and you must do it at home and you must practice your listening outside class, speaking was the one that they felt they really needed on their main course. And it really emerged that there were issues of integration. So again, people who had a large cohort of English native speakers in their class felt that they maybe couldn't handle the lessons as well. Maybe that it was quite difficult for them to feel comfortable in the class, and that they felt their speaking wasn't up to it. On the pre-sessional course, we have a conversation club where they do informal speaking, but again, they complained about that, and they said no, that wasn't really what they wanted, because they wanted native speaker contact. So there were a few limitations here. We felt that the students we spoke to, they were useful, they were helpful, but nobody from our largest nationality cohort offered to help. So we were really missing representation from about 60% of our students from one large nationality. We did notice definite instances of interview bias. So this student here, it's like, you can't say that, but I think it was genuine. The other thing that we noticed was it was really hard for the students to reflect on the spot. So we were saying 3 or 4 months after you finished the course, can you now reflect, now this minute, in English, on what happened before, and tell me all about it? And that really caused problems. People kept saying, well, I can't really remember, and I don't really know. So we thought, well, yeah, this is all very well, but it's not really enough for us. And that's where phase 2 came in. So we decided we would run the study again. And this time we got 8 students. So this is the summer just gone. 2 nationalities, many students this time from our main nationality cohort, but still a range of master's programs. What we did differently this time was we used something called narrative frames. I don't know if anybody's heard about narrative frames before. This is something that I learnt about at Barleap in April. And this is 2 ladies called Rosemary Wett and Claire Furno. And what they do is they create a series, it looks like this, a series of sentences. It's like a kind of a frame, if you like, a framework or a scaffold. And this is what the students fill in. So there was no face-to-face contact. We sent this to the students who said they would help. They filled, it's a gap fill. They filled in the gaps however they wanted, and they sent it back. And so we stuck to the themes that we'd had before, but with these paragraphs where we asked them to fill in the information. And we added one more, which was issues within the course, because I really wanted to ask them what they felt didn't work. So it's all very well saying, oh, that was great, but it's good to know as well what wasn't useful. So again, we looked at what they gave us, and what I've done here basically is I hope the red's visible, I've just put the second phase responses onto the themes from phase 1. And so what we can see is that, again, with assessment types, that seemed to be okay, that students were familiar with essay writing, critical thinking, presentation skills, all that was there. So we can sort of conclude that that's okay, that what we're giving them in terms of certainly writing and speaking is okay, it's effective. In terms of the effectiveness of the course, again, people said, yeah, it did the job, it was worth the money, somebody said, okay. And generally people said, yeah, it met expectations, it did what I wanted. And again, academic writing, academic English level, but not only the academic side, also understanding the postgraduate system, so helping them with life on a master's and meeting lovely classmates. And we didn't do that. That wasn't us, that's just what happened on the course. So it wasn't just academic things that they had learnt, and I thought that was quite interesting. In terms of confidence, Again, I suppose unsurprisingly, people said they felt confident in their academic skills. So, I know how to write an essay. Yeah, I'm happy with referencing. I know where the library is. Unusual, but good. I know how to think critically in an essay. But again, the speaking came up, and very much depending on the situation. And this is where we got quite a lot more information, because one of the narrative frames said, I feel confident using English when, and I feel I'm not confident using English when, and they all went for speaking. We didn't suggest speaking, but they all went for speaking. And again, we found that it was the skill that they felt that they were most lacking. We found that it was very situation dependent. People said, outside class it's fine, in daily life it's fine, with non-natives it's fine. Okay? But in the classroom, in a group of native speakers, with subject-specific vocabulary and discussions, I really don't feel comfortable. So there's really something here that it's standing out to us. Group work was interesting. It was quite ambiguous. Some people said group work is great, my colleagues really help me, and they support me in my speaking. And other people said group work is terrifying. I don't want to talk, I haven't got the words, I don't like it, I feel really isolated in a group. This isn't good. So speaking is clearly something that we need to think about a bit more. So, in comparison between the two phases, we can see that in terms of course effectiveness, it seems generally that students do think after 3 or 4 months on a master's that the pre-sessional course has been effective. It's helped them to understand common assessment types. So again, they can write an essay, they can reference, they can give a presentation. They're confident in academic skills, they can do critical thinking. They know the structures that they're supposed to use. Confidence in speaking is limited. They lack interaction with native speakers. But what was really interesting was that in both these, both in the interviews and the narrative frames, we didn't want to kind of push people in certain areas, so we didn't specifically ask about the reading and the listening and the changes to the assessment. But hardly anybody mentioned it at all. It was all writing, speaking, and reading and listening seemed to be kind of not really. And the only feedback that did come was in the part at the end where I said, was there anything that you didn't like or you didn't enjoy or wasn't useful? And I got, didn't enjoy the reading and I'm not using the lecture skills. Okay. So it turns out that lectures aren't a big thing on master's courses. There's a lot of seminars. I'm not using note-taking skills and I don't practice it. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for us, particularly as we had thought that changing this to continuous assessment would make the students less stressed, it would help them to see their progress during the course, it would help them to stop worrying about an exam, but perhaps not. So in terms of our course design, we need to refine the course. We have already put in lessons on reflective writing, which we know they need. We're going to change our speaking element. I think we're going to reduce our listening element a little bit and increase the speaking and introduce real-life academic scenarios. So things like you go to student support because you want an essay extension. Have the conversation. What's the language you might need? So these kind of scenarios. I'm wondering about increasing the weighting in the assessment of the speaking, whether that would, so increasing the assessment requirements and the weighting. And also about having workshops with subject lecturers, so going to their lecturers and saying, this is what our students have, this is what they are bringing you, this is what they can give, but this is what they lack. So maybe having more exchange with the lecturers who are receiving them after us. So in conclusion, we can say that students seem to define effectiveness in a couple of ways. So acculturation, so this idea of, I suppose, acclimatizing, if you like, to postgraduate life, understanding how it works. Integration, so making friends, they thought was really important. and interaction, so the speaking, again, with other students. We've understood from this that our course is effective in terms of writing and speaking, not enough in speaking, but definitely in terms of academic skills, our course is effective. What we teach stays with them and they use it definitely on their master's courses. Students seemed less concerned with grades, they seemed less concerned with assessment style, they just wanted to, I got this real feeling that they wanted to know what to do and be able to take it with them, but the scores didn't really seem to be a big fixation. It was, I've passed, and that's it. And yeah, very little mention of our reading and listening assessment styles, the skills that we taught them. So what we're thinking really is that we know that reading is important, we know that listening is important, we think that we're teaching them in the right way. I don't know what the solution to that is. I'm not sure if we need to change that or not. But what I do know is that if the students think the course was effective, and we think the course was effective, even if it's for different reasons, that perhaps that's enough. Perhaps we don't need to keep researching our courses. Perhaps if they're saying now that it's worked and it's useful, perhaps that we should accept their word. We should listen to them rather than looking for statistics and figures and what scores they've got on their masters. If they feel comfortable, if they've got friends, if they've understood the study skills, perhaps that should be enough for us, and we should accept their word and their experience rather than trying to reprove things from an academic point of view. So yeah, that's my references, and that's me. So thank you very much.
At the risk of putting you on the spot, do you want to take any questions?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. If anybody has anything to ask, or
Yes, I have a question.
yeah.
You go first.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned group work. I was just interested to know how much assessed group work or project work you do in your pre-sessionals and how effective you find it.
That's really interesting because at the moment we don't do group work. We do seminars, seminar skills. So they have to practice that and they're assessed on a seminar performance, if you like, but we don't actually do group work, and I think coming from this we probably need to put that in as well. So yeah, thank you, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Do you think that a similar project run with bachelor's students would kick out similar results or different?
I think that it's quite different for them because obviously they're younger and they've got longer, and it tends to be that they're often, for us anyway, they're often on courses where they're going into things like engineering, where it's much more practical. And so I think for them, it feels to me that for them it's really about just getting the English up and that they just want to get in and survive. So I'm not sure. I think I would maybe wait till after a year and then go back to them when they've had a whole experience, they've maybe matured a little bit, and then ask them. So, and maybe as a longer study then, first year, second year, third year. But I think at some point for them, what they learn in class would overtake or overshadow what we've taught them, because they're in it for longer. But yeah, it's an interesting question. We don't have many undergraduates anymore. Yeah.
I was wondering, is there any thought about comparing, like the actual grades and progress of these students who follow the PS versus those who don't? I think that kind of data would be readily available. You could compare students pretty easily. Go, oh, these guys actually get higher marks across the board in their masters or not?
It's been done in a couple of places have done it, and they've done it more actually with undergraduates. And looked at, I think that the results show that perhaps at some point the pre-sessionals, sort of maybe in the first term, they seem to have a head start and they seem to go better, but then the others catch up because maybe the others have come in with higher English, and so their English is all right, but the pre-sessionals have got the academic skills, but their English isn't as high, so it kind of balances out by the end. And I've started to think that pre-sessional as well as English, it's kind of the survival skills that they need as well as the English.
I'm interested in why they're not using note-taking skills.
Yeah, I was
is
a bit
it-
worried.
yeah. Is it possibly because they're recording what's going on and doing it and listening to it again later?
I think there's a couple of things. I think that we have a lot of students that go on to a course called Architecture and Urbanism, which is kind of not quite architecture, some town planning and architecture. And we met with their course leader a few weeks ago, and he said that they don't have lectures, that they have seminars, they have discussions, they have small group things. But I thought, well, you still need note taking of some kind. I think you're right, a lot of people record. We also have what's called lecture capture, which I don't know if anyone has, I don't know if you have here, where the lecture is recorded and we put it on the VLE, and then they listen back that way. So I think that happens, and I think despite our best efforts that a lot of students still make notes in their own language. So they're not using the ways that we've taught, because they're just reverting, because we're not watching, they're reverting back to their own language.
Is there any distinction in any of these groups? I mean, I'm not sure what kind of in-sessional support exists for these master's students, but if, was there any distinction between the two groups in either phase 1 or phase 2, where certain students were seeking out or receiving in-sessional help, and was that linked with their pre-sessional or the results that they gave? Or?
We offer in-sessional support for all international students. Pre-sessional students don't come.
Okay.
Some of them, but largely they don't come. At the end of pre-sessional, we have a talk and we explain what it is, and we say, don't be a stranger, and you know where we are, it'll be the same teachers, and I think that's why they don't come. Partly because maybe they don't want to admit that they still need help. I think partly because they've been thrown into another thing and they're so busy. And also partly because I think perhaps they think, I've got pre-sessional, I don't need any more. They told me that this was it. And so they tend not to come. The ones who haven't done pre-sessional tend to come to the in-sessional support. And again, it's something that we'd really like to do with subject teachers, to say, look, could you encourage them to come back to us? But I wonder if they feel that it's almost an admission of defeat. Oh, you're back. Well, hold on, I taught you for 10 weeks and you've come back. We would never obviously say that, but I wonder if they think,
That could maybe be something to do, like, in terms of the issues with subject-specific vocabulary. In-sessional support, you would think, would be the way that they would see fixing that, but obviously they're not.
Or bullying, maybe we need to just kind of guide them a bit more. But yeah, it's interesting why they don't come.
Threats.
Yeah, threats maybe, yeah. But it's something that certainly could be added to there as well. What support do you get now, or how are you continuing to improve your English, or hint, hint. But, yeah.
I think in the speaking skills that there are definitely skills that aren't commonly taught that are useful in things like seminar work, group work. For example, how to interrupt. If you don't know how to do it, it's very challenging to do. And I had a friend who spoke excellent Spanish, and for interest she went to do A-level Spanish when she came back to this country. And her lecturer would give out really interesting texts and then ask everybody to comment. And she said that even though her Spanish was excellent, she couldn't formulate her thoughts, put them into Spanish, and have the confidence to speak them to a group at the same time. And I think that applies to an awful lot of our students. By the time they've done that, the discussion's moved on.
So it's actually speed we need to practice, isn't it? Or speed of production, or
Yeah.
ideas creation, or something. Yeah, I definitely think it's not just the standard academic skills, it's these other things that we take for granted maybe, that they, or if you just said, if there was a phrase you could say that meant you were interrupting, which they don't know, something like that. But yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Fiona.
you very much.
Yeah, you can sit down. That's all right.